The morning sun beat down mercilessly on Nebraska City, as Brielle Summers wiped her brow with the back of her hand, staining her sleeve with a streak of garden soil. Her small medical practice at the edge of town was unusually quiet this Tuesday morning in May of 1875, giving her the rare opportunity to tend to her herbs and medicinal plants. At 26, Brielle had established herself as Nebraska City's only female doctor, a position that had earned her equal measures of respect and skepticism from the townsfolk of this Nebraska settlement. Brielle straightened her back, feeling the familiar ache that came from bending over her garden for too long. The distant sound of hoofbeats made her pause, her hand hovering over a sprig of lavender. The rhythm was uneven, desperate, not the casual trot of a visitor or the orderly march of the town marshal's horse. She rose to her feet just as a chestnut mare stumbled into view. The rider slumped across its neck, one hand tangled in the mane while the other clutched at his side. Blood soaked through a makeshift bandage around his torso, the dark crimson stain spreading with alarming speed. "Help!" the man gasped, his voice barely audible before he pitched sideways off his mount. Brielle rushed forward, reaching him just as he hit the ground with a dull thud. He was a large man, well over 6 feet tall, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair matted with dust and sweat. His clothes were travel-worn but of good quality, a blue cotton shirt now half crimson with blood, leather vest, sturdy trousers, and dusty boots with silver spurs. A gun belt hung low on his hips, the holster empty. "Sir, can you hear me?" Brielle pressed 2 fingers to his neck, finding a weak but steady pulse. The man's eyelids fluttered but didn't open. With difficulty, Brielle dragged him toward her house, which doubled as her medical practice. He was heavy, his muscular frame dead weight against her, but years of working alone had made her stronger than she looked. She managed to pull him onto her porch and then inside to the examination room. Her own breathing was labored by the time she had him positioned on the table. Swiftly, she cut away his shirt, revealing a jagged bullet wound just below his ribs. The bullet had gone clean through, which was fortunate, but he'd lost a dangerous amount of blood. As Brielle worked to clean and dress the wound, she studied his face. Strong jaw covered in stubble, straight nose, thick eyelashes handsome in a rugged way. No wedding band on his finger. She noticed a folded piece of paper sticking out of his vest pocket and, after a moment's hesitation, removed it. The paper contained a crudely drawn map with Quentin scribbled in the corner. No last name. She tucked the paper back where she'd found it and continued her work, wondering what kind of trouble this man Quentin presumably had gotten himself into. For 3 days, Quentin drifted in and out of consciousness. Brielle canceled her appointments, focusing solely on keeping him alive. On the morning of the 4th day, she was changing his bandages when his eyes finally opened, fully clear, alert, and startlingly blue. "Where am I?" His voice was deep but raspy from disuse. "My medical practice in Nebraska City," Brielle replied, continuing her work. "I'm Dr. Summers. You've been unconscious for 3 days." He tried to sit up but winced and fell back against the pillow. "Doctor, you're a woman. Your powers of observation are impressive for a man who's been at death's door," she said dryly. "Yes, I'm a woman, and a doctor, and the person who's kept you alive, so perhaps a thank you might be in order before you question my qualifications." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Thank you, Dr. Summers. You're welcome, Mr. Everhart, Quentin Everhart." "Well, Mr. Everhart, you've been shot. The bullet went through clean, but you lost a lot of blood. You're lucky to be alive," he nodded, his expression guarded. "Guess I am." "Would you care to tell me how you ended up with a bullet in your side?" Quentin looked away, his jaw tightening. "Disagreement over a card game." Brielle raised an eyebrow. Must have been quite a disagreement. The other fellow thought I was cheating. I wasn't. He met her eyes again. How much do I owe you for your services, doctor? We can discuss payment when you're well enough to leave. She finished securing the fresh bandage, which won't be for at least another week, so make yourself comfortable. I can't stay here that long, he protested, attempting again to sit up. Brielle placed a firm hand on his shoulder, pushing him back down. You can and you will, unless you're eager to reopen that wound and bleed to death after all my hard work saving you. He searched her face for a moment, then relaxed with a sigh of resignation. Yes, madam. Good. Now, are you hungry? The next few days established a routine. Brielle would check his wound in the morning, bring him meals, and occasionally sit with him in the evenings, reading from one of her medical journals or a novel while he listened, sometimes asking questions about her practice or the town. Quentin was a man of few words, but Brielle sensed intelligence behind his reticence. He never volunteered information about himself, and she didn't press, though curiosity gnawed at her. On the 6th day, when Brielle returned from a house call, she found Quentin sitting on the edge of the bed, his feet on the floor. What are you doing? She demanded, setting down her medical bag. Testing my legs, he replied. They still work. Of course they work. The bullet didn't hit your legs. She moved to his side, noting with professional satisfaction that his color had improved significantly. But you still need to rest. I've rested enough. There was a note of restlessness in his voice. I need to get moving. Why? Is someone after you? The question slipped out before she could stop it. His eyes narrowed slightly. What makes you ask that? Brielle shrugged, busying herself with arranging her medical supplies. Just a feeling. Most men who get shot over card games and then try to leave before they are healed are usually running from something or someone. Quentin was silent for a long moment. You're perceptive, Doc. It comes with the territory. She paused, then added more gently, whatever trouble you're in, Mr. Everhart, you're safe here for now. No one's come looking for you. Another silence stretched between them. Finally, he sighed. It wasn't exactly a card game. Brielle waited, sensing he was finally ready to talk. I'm a bounty hunter, he said. Was tracking a man named Wilson Blackstone. He robbed a bank in St. Louis, killed 2 people. I caught up to him about 30 miles east of here. And he shot you, Quentin nodded. I underestimated him. Won't make that mistake again. So he's still out there. For now, but I'll find him. Brielle felt a chill. You intend to go after him again, after he nearly killed you? It's my job, he said simply. And he's dangerous, needs to be brought to justice. Justice or revenge? She asked quietly, his blue eyes hardened. Justice. I don't kill for pleasure or vengeance, Dr. Summers. I bring criminals to trial. Brielle nodded, believing him despite herself. Well, you won't be bringing anyone to trial if you don't heal properly first. A week after Quentin's arrival, Brielle deemed him well enough to move from the examination room to the spare bedroom in her house. He was gaining strength rapidly, now able to walk short distances without assistance. That evening, as they sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Quentin finally asked the question that had clearly been on his mind. How does a woman become a doctor out here? Brielle smiled faintly, with determination and a good deal of stubbornness. She looked at him. My father was a doctor. He taught me everything he knew from the time I was a child. When he died, I went east to Philadelphia to the Women's Medical College, came back here 4 years ago. And the town accepted you, not at first. She remembered those early days, the whispers, the skepticism, the outright hostility from some quarters. They didn't have much choice after the influenza outbreak 3 years ago. The nearest male doctor was in Lincoln, a day's ride away. I saved a lot of lives that winter." Quentin studied her face in the fading light. Must be lonely. The observation, so simple and yet so accurate, caught her off guard. It had been a long time since anyone had seen through her carefully constructed facade of competence and self-sufficiency. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But I'm doing what I love." "What about family? Husband?" Brielle tensed slightly. "I was engaged once." "His name was Thomas Mitchell. He was a lawyer from Omaha." Quentin waited, sensing there was more to the story. "He died 2 years ago, pneumonia." The words still hurt, even after all this time. "I couldn't save him." "I'm sorry," Quentin said softly. She nodded, looking away. "So am I." The silence that followed was companionable rather than awkward. As the stars began to emerge in the darkening sky, Brielle found herself wondering what it would be like to have someone to share these moments with regularly, someone who understood the weight of responsibility she carried, someone who saw her as both a woman and a doctor. She glanced at Quentin, surprised to find him watching her, his expression thoughtful. For a brief moment, something passed between them, a spark of understanding, perhaps, or something deeper. Then he winced, shifting in his chair. "Pain?" she asked, professional concern replacing whatever she had felt a moment before. "A little," he admitted. "Let's get you inside. Time for me to check that wound anyway." As she helped him to his feet, her hand on his arm, Brielle was acutely aware of his strength, his warmth. She told herself it was merely medical observation, nothing more. But deep down, she knew she was in danger of letting this mysterious cowboy slip past the defenses she'd built around her heart since Thomas's death. The next morning, Brielle was awakened by a loud knocking at her door. She glanced at the small clock on her bedside table, barely 6 o'clock. Hastily donning a robe over her nightgown, she hurried to answer, hoping it wasn't an emergency. Marshal Frank Donovan stood on her porch, hat in hand. At 55, with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face, he was a fixture in Nebraska City, respected for his fairness and steady temperament. "Morning, Dr. Summers. Sorry to disturb you so early." "That's all right, Marshal. Is someone hurt?" "No, madam. Just looking for information." He glanced past her into the house. "Heard you've got a patient staying with you. Stranger rode in about a week ago, bleeding from a gunshot wound." Brielle felt a flicker of apprehension. "Yes, that's right. He's recovering well." "Mind if I speak with him?" She hesitated. "He's still quite weak, Marshal. I'd prefer not to disturb his rest unnecessarily." Donovan's expression was polite but determined. "Won't take long, Doc. Just need to ask him a few questions." Before she could respond, Quentin's voice came from behind her. "It's all right, Dr. Summers." She turned to see him standing in the hallway, dressed in the clean clothes she had provided, a simple white shirt and dark trousers. His gun belt was conspicuously absent. "Mr. Everhart, you should be resting," she protested. He gave her a reassuring nod before addressing the marshal. "Frank Donovan, been a while." Donovan's eyes widened in recognition. "Quentin Everhart, didn't recognize you with that beard." He extended his hand, which Quentin shook firmly. "Last I heard, you were chasing bounties down in Arizona territory." "Moved my territory north a couple years back," Quentin replied. Brielle looked between them, confused. "You two know each other. We've crossed paths a few times," Donovan explained. "Everhart here has a reputation for bringing in his bounties alive when most others would find it easier to bring them in dead." "May I ask what brings you to my door so early, Marshal?" Quentin asked. Donovan's expression grew serious. "Got word of a shooting east of here. Man matching Wilson Blackstone's description was seen in town yesterday. Thought you might be involved given your profession." "Blackstone shot me and left me for dead 8 days ago," Quentin said grimly. "If he's in town, I need to go after him." Not in your condition, Brielle interjected firmly. Donovan nodded. Doc's right. Besides, I've already sent telegrams to neighboring towns. We'll find him. He's dangerous, Frank, Quentin warned. Don't underestimate him. I never do. The marshal replaced his hat. You focus on getting better. Then maybe we can work together to bring him in. After Donovan left, Brielle turned to Quentin, her arms crossed. You didn't mention you knew our marshal. You didn't ask. There was a hint of amusement in his eyes. Don't you dare think about going after this Blackstone man, she said sternly. You're nowhere near ready. I know my limitations, Doc. He took a step toward her, his expression softening. And I know when I owe someone my life, I won't risk what you've worked so hard to save. The sincerity in his voice made something flutter in Brielle's chest. She cleared her throat, stepping back slightly. Good. Now, since you're up, let me check your wound. In the examination room, Brielle removed the bandage, her fingers gentle against his skin. The wound was healing nicely, the angry red giving way to the pink of new tissue. You heal quickly, she observed. Good genes, I guess. He watched her work, his gaze never leaving her face. You're very good at what you do, Dr. Summers. Thank you, she applied a fresh bandage. And please call me Brielle. I think we're past formalities at this point. Brielle, he repeated, as if testing the name. It suits you. Beautiful name for a beautiful doctor. She felt warmth creep into her cheeks and busied herself with tidying up her supplies. Flattery won't get you permission to leave early, Mr. Everhart. Quentin, he corrected, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. And I wasn't trying to flatter my way out of your care, just stating a fact. Their eyes met, and for a moment Brielle forgot to breathe. No man had looked at her that way since Thomas, with such open appreciation and respect. The spell was broken by another knock at the door. Brielle stepped back, collecting herself. That will be Mrs. Peterson for her weekly tonic. Stay here and rest. As she left to attend to her patient, Brielle tried to ignore the warmth lingering in her cheeks and the unsettling awareness that Quentin Everhart was becoming more than just a patient to her. Over the next few days, Quentin's strength continued to improve. Brielle found herself enjoying his company more than she cared to admit. He was intelligent and surprisingly well-read for a bounty hunter, able to discuss everything from Shakespeare to current politics. He also proved useful around her small homestead, insisting on helping with chores despite her protests that he should rest. One afternoon, she returned from town to find him splitting firewood in her yard, his shirt discarded in the heat. She paused, grocery basket in hand, watching the play of muscles across his back and shoulders as he swung the axe. The bullet wound was still visible, a stark reminder of how close he'd come to death, but it no longer impeded his movements. I don't recall prescribing manual labor as part of your recovery, she called, approaching him. Quentin turned, wiping sweat from his brow. No, but you did say I needed to rebuild my strength. He grinned, the expression transforming his usually serious face. Besides, your woodpile was getting low and I hate being idle. Well, I appreciate the help, but don't overdo it. She handed him a canteen of water. Here, drink this before you collapse and undo all my good work. He took a long drink, then asked, How was town? The usual. Mrs. Blackwood's arthritis is acting up again, and Mr. Jenkins wanted something for his wife's headaches. She hesitated. There's also talk about Blackstone. No one's seen him for a few days. Marshal Donovan thinks he may have moved on. Quentin's expression darkened. He'll be back. Men like him always come back. Why is he so important to you? Surely there are other bounties you could pursue. He was quiet for a moment, seeming to debate how much to tell her. Finally, he sighed. Blackstone didn't just rob that bank in St. Louis, the people he killed. One of them was a friend of mine, Ben Harper. We rode together for years when I was starting out as a bounty hunter. He'd quit the life, settled down, was working as a bank guard to support his wife and new baby. Brielle's heart ached for him. I'm sorry, Quentin. I promised his widow I'd bring Blackstone to justice. His blue eyes held a steely determination. And I will, just as soon as you give me a clean bill of health. And then you'll leave, she said quietly, the realization bringing an unexpected pang of sadness. Something in her tone made him look at her more closely. That's the way it works in my line of work. Never stay in one place too long. Of course, she said briskly, gathering herself. I know that. I've grown accustomed to having someone around to talk to in the evenings. Quentin set down the axe, taking a step toward her. Brielle, I should start dinner, she interrupted, turning away before he could see the emotion in her eyes. Don't stay out here too long. That night, after a quiet dinner, they sat on the porch as had become their custom. The summer evening was warm, fireflies blinking in the gathering darkness, the scent of honeysuckle heavy in the air. Tell me about Thomas, Quentin said unexpectedly. Brielle looked at him in surprise. Why, he shrugged. You never talk about him. Thought maybe you'd want to. She was silent for a long moment, watching a firefly land on the porch railing. He was kind, believed in justice, in helping people who couldn't help themselves. He supported my decision to become a doctor when many others thought it was inappropriate for a woman. She smiled sadly. We were going to build a life together here. He was going to open a law practice in town. How did you meet? At a social in Omaha. I was visiting my aunt. He asked me to dance and stepped on my toes 3 times. The memory made her laugh softly. He was so apologetic, so earnest. We corresponded for months after I returned to Philadelphia for my studies. When I came back west, he followed. He sounds like a good man. He was. She hesitated, then added, the night he died, I was exhausted from treating patients during the influenza outbreak. I fell asleep at his bedside. When I woke up, he was gone. The guilt of that moment still haunted her. I've always wondered if I could have saved him if I'd stayed awake, if I'd noticed his breathing changing. You can't know that, Quentin said gently, and you can't blame yourself for being human. I'm a doctor. I should have done better. The words came out more harshly than she intended. Being a doctor doesn't make you infallible, Brielle. It just means you try harder than most to fight against the inevitable. He reached over and covered her hand with his. Thomas wouldn't want you punishing yourself. His touch was warm, comforting. Brielle found herself turning her hand over, her fingers interlacing with his. They sat like that in silence, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Nebraska sky. Thank you, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. For what? For listening. For understanding. She met his gaze in the dim light. Most people just tell me I should move on, find another husband, as if Thomas was replaceable. Quentin's thumb traced gentle circles on the back of her hand. Some losses change us forever. We don't move on from them so much as learn to carry them with us. The depth of understanding in his words made her wonder about his own losses, the experiences that had shaped this complex man. But before she could ask, a gunshot rang out in the distance, followed by the sound of galloping hooves and shouting from town. They both stood, Quentin's hand instinctively moving to his hip where his gun would normally be. Stay here, he ordered, his entire demeanor changing in an instant from gentle companion to alert predator. Don't be ridiculous, Brielle retorted, already heading inside. Someone might be hurt. She emerged moments later with her medical bag and a lantern. To her surprise, Quentin had retrieved his gun belt from wherever he'd been keeping it and was checking his revolver. You're not coming, he said firmly. I most certainly am. I'm the only doctor in town. She lifted her chin. And you're still my patient. If you insist on going, we go together. He looked like he wanted to argue but recognized the determination in her eyes. "Fine, but you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. No questions." They had barely started toward town when a rider approached at a gallop. Quentin pushed Brielle behind him, his gun raised but lowered it when Marshal Donovan's voice called out, "Everhart? Doc." Donovan reined in his horse, his face grim in the lantern light. "Blackstone's in town. Shot up the saloon, killed Jake the barkeep when he tried to intervene. He's holed up in the livery stable now, has young Tim Miller as a hostage." "Is anyone hurt?" Brielle asked. "A couple of men with minor injuries, nothing life-threatening." Donovan's gaze shifted to Quentin. "I could use your help, Everhart. You know this man better than anyone." Quentin nodded, his expression resolute. "Let me get my horse." "Quentin, you're not fully healed," Brielle protested. "This is madness. I have to go, Brielle." His eyes locked with hers. "That boy's life depends on it. I know how Blackstone thinks." She wanted to argue further but knew it would be futile. Instead, she said, "I'm coming with you. The injured will need attention." "Stay at the edge of town," he insisted. "Promise me." The intensity in his gaze made her nod reluctantly. "I promise." Minutes later, they were riding toward town, Quentin on his recovered chestnut mare, Brielle on her gray gelding. The main street was eerily quiet, the usual evening bustle replaced by an ominous silence. A small crowd had gathered near the saloon, held back by Donovan's deputy. Quentin dismounted, wincing slightly as the movement pulled at his healing wound. He helped Brielle down, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Be careful," she whispered. He nodded once, then turned to Donovan. "What's the situation?" "He's demanding a horse, supplies, and safe passage out of town. Says he'll kill the boy if we try anything." "How old is Tim?" Quentin asked. 17. Works at the livery, shoveling stalls after school." Quentin's jaw tightened. "Let me talk to him. You sure that's wise?" "He already tried to kill you once. He won't get a second chance." Quentin checked his gun again. "But I know him. He's desperate now, cornered. That makes him more dangerous, but it also means he might make mistakes." Donovan hesitated, then nodded. "All right. But I'll have men positioned on the rooftops with rifles, just in case." As the two men moved away to discuss strategy, Brielle made her way to the injured men, forcing herself to focus on her work rather than the danger Quentin was walking into. But her heart raced with fear for him, a fear that went beyond professional concern for a patient. Half an hour later, as she was finishing bandaging a cut on a man's forehead, she heard Quentin's voice ring out, clear and authoritative. "Wilson Blackstone. It's Quentin Everhart. We need to talk." The street fell silent, everyone straining to hear a response. After a long moment, a harsh voice called back from the livery stable, "Everhart, I thought I killed you." "Takes more than a lucky shot to keep me down," Quentin replied, stepping into the street where he could be seen from the stable. "Let the boy go, Wilson. He's got nothing to do with this. So I can hang. No thanks. You're not getting out of here alive if you harm that boy, you know that." Quentin took another step forward. "But I give you my word, let him go and you'll get a fair trial." A bitter laugh echoed from the stable. "Your word? What good is the word of a man who hunts his own kind for money?" "I've never broken my word, Wilson, not once. You know my reputation." Brielle watched, her heart in her throat, as Quentin continued to walk slowly toward the livery, exposed and vulnerable in the open street. The moonlight illuminated him clearly, a tall figure, steady and unafraid, despite the gun trained on him from the shadows of the stable. "Stop right there," Blackstone shouted. "One more step and I'll put a bullet between your eyes." Quentin stopped. "Where will that get you, Wilson? There are rifles aimed at that building from every direction. Kill me and you'll be dead before I hit the ground. Then I'll take the boy with me, And prove what? That you're a coward who hides behind children. Quentin's voice was calm, almost conversational. That's not the Wilson Blackstone I've been tracking. The man I've been after is smart, calculating. Killing that boy is the act of a desperate man with no options left. A tense silence followed. Brielle could almost feel Blackstone considering his options, weighing Quentin's words. "What are you proposing?" Blackstone finally asked, his voice less certain. "Come out, hands up. Let the boy go. I'll personally ensure you get to trial safely. And then hang, maybe, maybe not. But you'll have a chance to tell your side of the story. The bank robbery, Ben Harper, all of it." Another long silence. Then, "How do I know this isn't a trick?" "Because I'm going to holster my gun and walk in there unarmed." Before anyone could react, Quentin slowly placed his revolver in its holster. "Quentin, no." Brielle couldn't stop herself from crying out. He didn't look back, but his shoulders tensed at the sound of her voice. "It's all right, Brielle," he called, his eyes still on the stable door. "Everything's going to be all right." With that, he walked steadily toward the livery, his hands visible at his sides. The minutes that followed were the longest of Brielle's life. The crowd waited in breathless silence, the tension palpable. Then, suddenly, the stable door opened and a young boy stumbled out, pale and frightened but unharmed. Marshal Donovan rushed forward to pull the boy to safety. All eyes turned back to the stable entrance, where Quentin now stood with a man Brielle presumed was Wilson Blackstone, a wiry, hard-faced individual with cold eyes and a sneer that didn't quite mask his fear. Quentin had Blackstone's arm twisted behind his back, the man's own gun pressed against his temple. "It's over, Wilson," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You're going to face justice for what you did to Ben Harper and his family." As Donovan and his deputy moved in to take custody of the prisoner, the crowd erupted in cheers and applause. Brielle sagged with relief, only then realizing how tightly she'd been holding herself. Quentin handed Blackstone over to the lawman, then turned, his eyes searching the crowd until they found Brielle. The look they exchanged across the distance was filled with unspoken emotion, relief, admiration, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. Later, after Blackstone had been secured in the town jail and the excitement had died down, Brielle found Quentin sitting on the steps of the marshal's office, his head in his hands. "Are you all right?" she asked softly, sitting beside him. He looked up, fatigue evident in every line of his face. "Just tired, and my side is reminding me I'm not fully healed. Let me see." Without waiting for permission, she lifted his shirt, examining the wound in the dim light from the office window. It had bled slightly but hadn't reopened. "You're lucky, but you need rest." Quentin caught her hand as she lowered his shirt. "I took a risk in there, Brielle, a risk I wouldn't normally take. I know, it was brave and foolish." "No, you don't understand." His fingers tightened around hers. "When I walked in there, all I could think about was getting back to you. Not the bounty, not even justice for Ben, just you." The confession hung between them, honest and raw. Brielle felt her heart quicken. "Quentin, I know it's too soon," he said quickly. "You're still grieving Thomas and well, I'm not exactly the kind of man a woman like you would consider." "A woman like me," she echoed, "educated, respected, with roots and a purpose." He shook his head. "I've spent most of my adult life chasing bounties, sleeping under the stars more often than in a proper bed." "What could I possibly offer you?" Brielle reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of his jaw. "How about we start with honesty and respect, and the way you make me feel when you look at me like I'm seen for who I am, not just as a doctor or a woman, but both." His blue eyes searched hers. "And how do I look at you? Like I matter? Like what I think and feel is important to you?" She smiled faintly. No one has looked at me that way since Thomas. Quentin covered her hand with his own, turning his face slightly to press a kiss against her palm. Because it is important. You are important, Brielle Summers. The tenderness of the gesture, the sincerity in his voice, broke something loose inside her, a dam of grief and loneliness she had built so carefully over the past 2 years. Tears filled her eyes, surprising her. I'm sorry, she whispered, trying to turn away. But Quentin wouldn't let her. His hand cupped her cheek, gently turning her face back toward his. Don't apologize for feeling, Brielle, not to me, never to me. And then he was kissing her, softly at first as if afraid she might shatter, then more deeply as she responded, her hands coming up to cradle his face. It was a kiss of discovery, of promises, of possibilities neither had dared to contemplate until this moment. When they finally parted, both breathless, Quentin rested his forehead against hers. I should warn you, I've never stayed in one place for very long. Are you trying to talk me out of this already? She asked, a smile tugging at her lips. He chuckled, the sound warm and rich. Just being honest. My life has always been on the move, following the next bounty, the next criminal. And is that what you want for the rest of your life? The question seemed to surprise him. I haven't really thought about it. It's all I've known for so long. Brielle sat back slightly, looking into his eyes. Maybe it's time to think about it. Not for me, I'm not asking for promises or commitments, Quentin. It's far too soon for that. But for yourself, what do you want your life to be? He was quiet for a long moment, considering her words. I don't know, he admitted finally, but I think. I'd like to find out, with you if you're willing. The simple honesty of his answer touched her deeply. I'm willing, she said softly, one day at a time. He smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his face, making him look younger, unburdened. One day at a time, he agreed, sealing the promise with another kiss. The weeks that followed were a time of healing, not just for Quentin's body, but for both their hearts. As summer ripened toward autumn, they fell into a comfortable rhythm. Quentin stayed in Brielle's spare room, officially still recovering, though they both knew he was well enough to travel if he chose to. He made himself useful around her property, repairing her porch, tending to her horses, and even assisting with some of her patients when an extra pair of hands was needed. The townsfolk, initially wary of the mysterious bounty hunter in their midst, gradually accepted his presence, especially after the incident with Blackstone. Marshal Donovan, in particular, seemed pleased by the development. Never thought I'd see the day Quentin Everhart would settle down, he remarked to Brielle one afternoon as she treated his arthritic knee. You've worked quite a miracle there, Doc. He hasn't settled down, Brielle corrected, though she couldn't help the flush that warmed her cheeks. He's just taking some time to recover. Donovan gave her a knowing look. If you say so. But I've known that man for nigh on 10 years, and I've never seen him stay in one place this long unless he was laid up in jail or a hospital. The marshal's words stayed with Brielle, feeding a hope she tried to temper with realistic expectations. She and Quentin hadn't discussed the future beyond vague allusions. Their relationship had deepened, physical attraction blossoming into genuine affection and respect, but neither had spoken of love or permanence. Then came the telegram that changed everything. Quentin received it on a crisp September morning. Brielle was with a patient when he rode into town to pick up supplies, so she didn't see his face when he read it. But when she returned home that evening, she knew immediately that something was wrong. He was sitting on the porch, staring out at the setting sun, a piece of paper crumpled in his fist. Quentin, she asked, setting down her medical bag. What is it? He looked up, his expression unreadable. There's a bounty, big one. Bank robber up in Dakota Territory. Her heart sank, but she kept her face neutral. I see. When will you leave? Tomorrow, if I'm going. He stood, pacing the length of the porch. I haven't decided yet. What's to decide? She asked, genuinely confused. Isn't this what you do? He stopped, turning to face her. It is. But, but, but I've been thinking about what you asked me that night, about what I want my life to be. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd come to recognize. For the first time in years, I'm not sure the answer is chasing the next bounty. Hope fluttered in Brielle's chest, but she pushed it down. What would the answer be then? Quentin crossed the porch to stand before her, taking both her hands in his. Maybe it's time I put down roots, found a place to call home. His blue eyes held hers, earnest and vulnerable. A person to come home to. Quentin, are you saying? I'm saying I love you, Brielle Summers. I didn't expect it, didn't plan for it. But somewhere between you saving my life and me realizing I couldn't imagine a future without you in it, I fell in love with you. The declaration took her breath away. For a moment she could only stare at him, tears welling in her eyes. His expression faltered at her silence. I understand if you don't feel the same way. If it's too soon after Thomas, I love you too, she interrupted, squeezing his hands. I think I have for weeks now, but I was afraid to admit it, even to myself. Afraid that you would leave, that I would lose someone again. Relief and joy spread across his face. I can't promise I'll never leave, Brielle. My past, the life I've led there might be times when I need to go after someone dangerous, someone who needs to be brought to justice. I understand that, she said softly. I wouldn't ask you to change who you are, but I can promise that I'll always come back to you. He lifted one hand to cup her cheek. If you'll have me, I want to build a life here, with you. What about the bounty in Dakota Territory? She asked. He smiled, releasing her hands to pull the crumpled telegram from his pocket. He tore it in half, then in quarters, letting the pieces flutter to the porch floor. Someone else can collect it. I found something far more valuable right here. Brielle laughed through her tears, throwing her arms around his neck. Are you sure about this? Really sure? Because if you resent me later for keeping you from the life you love, Quentin silenced her with a kiss, deep and passionate, pouring all his certainty into the gesture. When they finally parted, both breathing heavily, he said, I'm sure, Brielle. The only thing I'm surer of is that I love you. That night, for the first time, they shared her bed, their lovemaking a tender exploration, a sealing of promises, a beginning rather than an ending. As they lay tangled together afterward, Brielle's head on his chest, his heart beat strong and steady beneath her ear, she felt a sense of peace she had thought lost to her forever after Thomas's death. What are you thinking? Quentin asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. That I never expected this, she admitted. When I pulled you off that horse, half dead from a bullet wound, I never imagined you would become so important to me. He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly under her cheek. Life has a way of surprising us, doesn't it? I came to Nebraska City chasing a criminal and found a future instead. Speaking of futures, she said, propping herself up on one elbow to look at him, what exactly do you plan to do now if not bounty hunting? I've been giving that some thought. He tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. Marshal Donovan mentioned he could use a deputy, said the town's growing fast enough to warrant it. You'd be good at that, she said, smiling. The townspeople already respect you after the Blackstone incident, and I'd be home every night, he added, pulling her closer. With you. The simple domesticity of that future, coming home to each other, sharing meals and conversations, building a life together, filled Brielle with a quiet joy. There's something else, Quentin said, his tone more serious. Something I've been wanting to ask you. What is it? He sat up, reaching for something in the pocket of his trousers, which lay discarded beside the bed. When he turned back to her, He held a small, simple ring between his fingers, a band of silver with a modest sapphire stone. "I bought this in town today before I got that telegram," he explained, suddenly looking nervous. "I had it all planned out: dinner, sunset, flowers. But now I'm thinking, there's no more perfect moment than this." Brielle's heart pounded as she sat up, clutching the sheet to her chest. "Brielle Summers, you saved my life in more ways than one. You healed my body, but more than that, you showed me there's more to life than the next hunt, the next bounty. You gave me a reason to want a home, a future." He took a deep breath. "Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" Tears spilled down her cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak for a moment. Then, finding her voice, she whispered, "Yes, Quentin. Yes, I'll marry you." His face lit up with a joy she had never seen there before as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, the sapphire catching the lamplight. "It matches your eyes," she said softly, admiring it. "That's why I chose it." He kissed her again, gentle and sweet. "I want to marry you soon, Brielle. I don't see any reason to wait." "Neither do I," she agreed. "Though some of the town gossips might raise an eyebrow at how quickly we're moving." Quentin laughed. "Let them talk. We know what we feel is real." "We do," she murmured, settling back into his arms. "I never thought I'd find love again after Thomas. Never thought I'd want to." "I know," he said, his voice soft with understanding. "And I'm not trying to replace what you had with him. That was your first love, and it will always be special. But this is different," she said, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. "Not lesser, just different. Deeper in some ways, because I know how precious and fragile life can be, how easily happiness can be taken away. All the more reason to embrace it fully while we can," he said, kissing the top of her head. As they drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, Brielle marveled at the strange twists of fate that had brought this man into her life. A wounded stranger who had healed her broken heart, as surely as she had healed his wounded body. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the town church. Marshal Donovan stood as Quentin's best man, and Mrs. Peterson, Brielle's most loyal patient, served as her matron of honor. The entire town turned out for the event, curious to witness the union of their respected doctor and the former bounty hunter who had decided to make Nebraska City his home. Brielle wore a gown of ivory silk, ordered hastily from Omaha but altered to perfection by the local seamstress. Quentin, looking almost uncomfortable in his new suit, couldn't take his eyes off her as she walked down the aisle toward him. "You are the most beautiful woman I have ever seen," he whispered when she reached his side. "And you clean up quite nicely yourself, Mr. Everhart," she returned with a smile. The ceremony was brief, the traditional words spoken with conviction and emotion. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Quentin kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes and cheers from the congregation. The celebration afterward was lively, spilling out from the church onto the main street, with music and dancing continuing well into the evening. As the newlyweds slipped away to begin their life together, Brielle couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed in the few months since Quentin had ridden into her life, bleeding and near death. She had saved him, yes, but he had saved her too from a life of loneliness, from the grief that had threatened to define her existence since Thomas's death. In healing his wound, she had found her own heart mending, opening again to the possibility of love and happiness. 1 year later, Brielle sat on their porch, watching the sunset paint the Nebraska sky in brilliant hues of orange and gold. Her medical practice continued to thrive, now housed in a separate building next to their expanded home. Quentin had proven himself an excellent deputy marshal, his experience as a bounty hunter giving him insights that helped keep the peace in their growing town. but the greatest joy of their life together lay sleeping in her arms their 2-month-old son, Benjamin Thomas Everhart, named for both Quentin's fallen friend and Brielle's first love. The baby stirred, his tiny face scrunching before relaxing again, his fingers curling reflexively around her thumb. The sound of hoofbeats announced Quentin's return from his daily patrol. He dismounted with the easy grace she had come to love, his badge gleaming on his chest, his smile widening as he caught sight of his wife and son. "How are my 2 favorite people?" he asked, climbing the porch steps to join them. "Missing you," Brielle replied, tilting her face up for his kiss, "but otherwise perfect." Quentin sat beside her, his arm encircling her shoulders as he gazed down at their sleeping child. "He's growing so fast." "He is, Mrs. Peterson says he has your eyes and my stubbornness." "Poor child," Quentin chuckled. "Though I can't complain about the stubbornness. If you weren't so determined, I might have bled to death on your doorstep and we wouldn't be here now." "True," she agreed, leaning into his embrace. "I'm very glad I decided to save you despite your initial rudeness." "I wasn't rude," he protested. "I was dying. You questioned my qualifications because I'm a woman, and you put me firmly in my place," he reminded her with a grin. "One of the many reasons I fell in love with you." She laughed softly, careful not to wake the baby. "And here I thought it was my medical skills and stunning beauty. Those two." His expression grew more serious as he looked out at the setting sun. "Do you ever regret it, Brielle, marrying me, giving up the independence you worked so hard for?" She turned to face him, surprised by the question. "I haven't given up anything, Quentin. I still have my practice, my patience. The only difference is that now I have you and Benjamin as well." She touched his cheek gently. "My life is fuller, richer because of you." "How could I possibly regret that?" The doubt in his eyes faded, replaced by a warmth that never failed to make her heart skip. "I just want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted." "I am happy," she assured him. "Happier than I ever thought possible after Thomas died." "You helped me find joy again, Quentin. You helped me believe in second chances." He leaned forward, pressing his forehead against hers, a gesture of intimacy they had shared since those first days of his recovery. "I love you, Dr. Everhart." "And I love you, Deputy Everhart," she returned, their son stirring between them as if sensing the depth of emotion that connected his parents. As the first stars appeared in the darkening sky, Brielle reflected on the strange and wonderful journey that had brought them to this moment. A bullet wound, a desperate ride, a wounded stranger who became the center of her world. She had nursed him back to health, never knowing that in the process he would heal her broken heart, giving her a love and a future she had never dared to dream of after losing Thomas. Life, she had learned, was full of unexpected twists and turns, of joy following sorrow, of healing emerging from pain. And as she sat on the porch of their home, her husband's arm around her and their child in her arms, Brielle Summers Everhart knew with absolute certainty that some wounds were meant to be, if only to lead us to where we truly belong. 5 years later, the Everhart household was a bustling center of activity. Benjamin, now a lively 5-year-old with his father's blue eyes and his mother's curious nature, was joined by 3-year-old Emma Grace, whose dark curls and sweet temperament had wrapped the entire town around her little finger. Brielle's medical practice had grown to include a small hospital wing, where she occasionally trained young women interested in nursing or midwifery, breaking ground for the next generation of female medical practitioners in the West. Quentin had been promoted to marshal after Frank Donovan retired, a position he filled with the same steady determination and fairness that had made him successful as a bounty hunter. Occasionally, he still traveled to bring in particularly dangerous fugitives, But these trips were rare and brief, his priorities firmly centered on his family and community. On a warm summer evening, much like the one when Quentin had first ridden into her life, they celebrated their 5th wedding anniversary with a small gathering of friends in the garden behind their home. As the children played under the watchful eye of Mrs. Peterson, who had become a surrogate grandmother to them, Quentin pulled Brielle aside, leading her to a quiet corner beneath the old oak tree. "You remember what you asked me once," he said, taking both her hands in his. "About what I wanted my life to be," she nodded, smiling at the memory. "You said you weren't sure, but you wanted to find out with me." "I was so lost then," he admitted, chasing bounties, moving from town to town, never letting myself get close to anyone. I thought that was all there was for me." He glanced over at their children, his expression softening. "I never imagined this life, Brielle. Never thought I could be this happy, this complete." "Neither did I," she confessed. "After Thomas died, I thought that part of my life was over, that I would be a doctor and nothing more, never a wife again, never a mother. And now look at us," he said, a hint of wonder in his voice. "2 children, a home, a community that respects us both." "3 children, actually," Brielle corrected, her eyes sparkling with the secret she'd been waiting to share. "I confirmed it this morning. We'll welcome another little Everhart this winter." Quentin's face lit up with joy as he lifted her off her feet, spinning her around beneath the oak tree. "Really? You're certain?" "As certain as a doctor can be about these things," she laughed, clinging to his shoulders. He set her down gently, his hands moving to rest protectively over her still flat stomach. "Another baby," he marveled. "Benjamin and Emma will be thrilled." "I thought we might name this one after your parents if it's a boy," Brielle suggested. "Michael James has a nice sound to it, don't you think?" "It's perfect," he agreed, his voice thick with emotion. "And if it's a girl, Sarah Elizabeth, after my mother," he nodded, pulling her close. "I never thought I'd have this, Brielle. A family, children with my blood and yours mixed together. A legacy beyond the bounties I've collected." "You've built much more than that, Quentin," she said, resting her head against his chest, listening to the strong, steady beat of his heart, the heart she had helped heal all those years ago. "You've built a life of purpose and love. You've made this town safer, better. You've been a father our children adore and a husband I fall more in love with every day. Not bad for a wounded stranger who stumbled into your garden half dead, is it?" he teased. "Not bad at all," she agreed, tilting her face up for his kiss. As their lips met, sealing their love and their shared joy over their growing family, Brielle reflected on the twisting path that had brought them to this moment. A bullet wound that might have ended Quentin's life had instead given birth to something beautiful and enduring. In nursing him back to health, she had found her own heart healing, opening to a love deeper and more profound than she had ever imagined possible. And in the warmth of their embrace, beneath the oak tree that had witnessed their journey from wounded strangers to beloved family, Brielle knew with absolute certainty that some wounds were truly blessings in disguise, painful beginnings that led to the most beautiful of endings. Their story, born of blood and pain and grief, had blossomed into a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone, in their children, in the town they helped build, and in the countless lives they touched through their shared commitment to healing, justice, and the belief that even the most broken hearts could find wholeness again in the tender care of the right hand.